Minister will always have regular calls with the President, and she has been explicit in criticising this tweet. And I know that she will always make sure that she calls it out where she sees it, and that is what she's done here.
Sir Peter Bottomley.
The retweet has been condemned. We can concentrate on the wrong that was done here by the original tweet. Can we ask the Home Secretary if we can do right by identifying, isolating and putting down, putting out the intended community, religious and ethnic strains?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question, and it is essential that we have a fair approach to all types of extremism, and with a view to that, we always make sure that the far-right extremism is treated just as harshly as it should be as any sort of radical Islamic terrorism. And it's interesting to observe that 25% of the referrals to the Channel programme, which is the bespoke programme following Prevent referrals, are in fact on the far-right side.
Diane Abbott.
Yeah. The Home Secretary will appreciate that on this side of the House, we believe the United States is our most important ally. We would anticipate that any British government would want to work closely with the United States on issues of mutual concern. And we on this side of the House bow to no one in our affection and respect for the American people. But on the question of the online activities of the 45th President, does the Home Secretary accept that the fact that the 45th President chose to retweet material from Britain First is not just offensive to British people of Muslim heritage, it is not just offensive to British people of black and minority ethnic heritage, it is offensive to all decent British people. And it is also an attack on the values of this country. So whilst on this side of the House we appreciate the importance of realpolitik, we would also call on the government to make clear that in no way and at no time does it give any support whatsoever to the distasteful views of the 45th President on race and migration and our Muslim communities internationally, because to do anything else would be an affront to voters in this country, whichever side of the House they support.
Home Secretary.
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her powerful response. And I think that it is fair to say that we have been very clear. President Donald Trump was wrong to retweet videos posted by the FAR group Britain First. We have said so clearly in this House, and the Prime Minister has said so clearly online. We will continue to speak freely and frankly when it takes place.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the whole House will agree with the Prime Minister's words. And one of the advantages of having such a special relationship with the United States is when a friend tells you you've done something dreadfully wrong, you tend to listen. And wouldn't the world be a better place if the Prime Minister could persuade the President of the United States to delete his Twitter account?
Well, my honourable friend makes an important point. It is true. I think we all listen more carefully, perhaps, to criticism from our friends than from people who we don't have a relationship with. So I hope that the Prime Minister's comments will have some impact on the President. And it's interesting to note my honourable friend's advice regarding Twitter accounts. I'm sure many of us might share his view.
Stuart C. MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On these benches, we have long taken the view that the current President of the United States should not be afforded a state visit to the United Kingdom, and yesterday's actions have reinforced that absolutely. We respect absolutely the office of the President of the United States, a fantastic country and ally. However, the sharing of tweets by an extremist, offensive and racist organisation is not fitting of someone holding such high office and must be condemned unequivocally. So we welcome Downing Street's assertion that the tweets were wrong, but we call for the government to go further, because isn't one of the key dangers of a state visit that we have absolutely no idea of what the President will say or tweet next and before he visits? So what does he actually need to say or tweet before the idea of a state visit is ditched once and for all?
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, an invitation for the visit has been extended and accepted, but the dates and the precise arrangements have yet to be agreed.
Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Local authorities have a key role in combating extremism. Can the Home Secretary say exactly what the government plans to do further to support local authorities, ensuring that they can undertake this role?
Yes, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Local authorities do have an important role to play. We have an active engagement programme with them through the Prevent programme, which allows us to help to support community organisations who are really embedded in the local area, who can then go out and engage with local groups and provide the support to safeguard people, safeguard particularly young men and women who may be becoming radicalised. I think it's an incredibly important part of the way that we look after our communities in this country, and we will continue to do so.
Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We agree on the importance of our relationship with the US, and our peoples have stood together against far-right extremism and against Islamist extremism, and will do so again. But that is exactly why we cannot pander now, because Britain First gets its succour from spreading its poison and its extremism online. That is how it works, and the President of the United States has just given it a rocket boost in promoting hatred in our communities. Online is where the new battle for democracy is being fought, and the Prime Minister has rightly challenged Putin's Russia for what she described as seeking to weaponise information to plant fake stories in an attempt to sow discord. And that means no matter what diplomatic route we find to do it, we cannot simply roll out a red carpet and give a platform for the President of the United States to also sow discord in our communities. We know that he and they will keep doing this and keep spreading extremism, and we also know from the plaque behind us and from our own history where the spread of extremism leads, unless enough of us are prepared to stand up now and say no.
Secretary.
We do stand up to extremism. We stand up to it in our own communities, and we stand up to it, as the Prime Minister has when she criticised the President for doing that retweeting for which we are here and discussing it today. In terms of trying to clean up the online community, the Honourable Lady, Right Honourable Lady, is absolutely right. That is where so much of the battle takes place, which is why this government is focused on making sure that we take it down, and which is why our relationship with the US is so important. When I called for a roundtable of these internet giants after the first terrorist attack in March, what we got was the UK representatives coming. It was only with the support of the US that we were able to get the Global Internet Forum set up. They are based in San Francisco. Being able to work at the highest levels with our US friends in order to get action taken is the best way to achieve those outcomes. I would just urge her to bear that in mind.
Tim Lawton.
Mr. Speaker, about a month ago, the most popular man in the world was a last-day employee of Twitter who unplugged the account of the President of the United States. Was he not right? And if Twitter is genuine in its commitment to fight hate crime online, it should have no hesitance in taking down the Twitter account of the first citizen of the US as it would any other citizen of the world who peddles such hate crime.
I am sure that the Chief Executive of Twitter will have heard the interesting suggestion from my honourable friend, and we will leave it to them to decide what action to take.
Dennis Skinner.
I think it's pretty clear that on the basis of what we already know about this fascist president, that mere words are not enough. Action is needed. 3 times she's already been asked by 3 people on this side of the House to cancel the state visit. Action is needed now, not a slap on the wrist. Cancel the state visit.
Home Secretary.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his views, and I can only repeat what I've said before, that the invitation has been extended and accepted, and we have yet to make the arrangements. But thank you for your view. Thank you.
Sir Mike Penning.
Isn't it irony that the President of the United States, who loves Twitter and talks about fake news, actually retweeted fake news? But the danger is, the real danger is, that the vast majority of our constituents have never heard of Britain First, and this has given them huge oxygen. Shouldn't we all go back to our constituencies and go to our communities and say that no matter what their faith is, no matter what their beliefs are, we are together as a community, and the President was stupid in what he did.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. He raises such an important point, which is we need to reassure our communities that the sort of hate that is promoted by Britain First is alien to us. And if we look at the response, not only to the tragic death of Joe Cox, but also to the terrorist attacks that we had this year, what we actually saw was our communities coming together, refusing to be divided, and making sure that we show that to be the case around our own neighbourhoods as well as across the benches of the House.
Khalid Mahmood.
Speaker, how would she respond if similar tweets to those made by President Trump were made by a Muslim leader promoting hatred? Would they be allowed into the UK?
No, they'd be banned, of course.
Secretary.
The honourable gentleman should not rush to that conclusion. As I hope he has heard, I have been clear that we take an even-handed approach to individuals and to extremism of any sort, which is why I took the time to point out that right-wing extremism of the sort we have seen retweeted and the sort that we have seen in national action, which means we have prescribed it, is just as hateful, just as dangerous as any sort of radical Islamic type.
Bob Blackman.
Speaker, I congratulate my right honourable friend and the Prime Minister for their strong words and strong action in condemning this evil words being spread. Can she look at encouraging the internet companies to make sure that Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts and other accounts are clearly identified as individuals, but also the organisations they represent? Because there is a risk that people think this is a general view of British people, and it clearly is not, and we need to isolate these people for the people that they are.
It's a very good point from my honourable friend. We have to be careful, it was also made by my honourable friend before him, that we have to be careful not to allow all this conversation about a hate-filled group to fuel some sort of interest in a group which we want to make sure does not represent Britain, does not represent our values, and should not in any way be interpreted as doing so. So I think it's an interesting point and one we should all act on.
Luciana Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, hate breeds hate, and an attack on the Muslim community is an attack on us all. Not content with attacking minorities in the United States by giving a platform to Britain First, which is a rabidly racist and neo-fascist organisation, Donald Trump is now actively sowing seeds of hatred in our country. At a time when the number of hate crimes in our country is going up and increasing, what action is the Home Secretary going to take today to mitigate against these horrific actions that the President has taken yesterday?
Secretary.
Well, I would say to the honourable lady, as she knows, I think, that we take all forms of hate crime very seriously. We always encourage the communities to replace them, to report them when it takes place. I have active engagement with the Police and Crime Commissioners and the Chief of Police to ensure that reporting does take place. And critically, we have a role to make sure that the online companies do more to make sure that it is taken down, do more to ensure that the sort of reports that we've had on fake news don't take place, and do more to help us identify who has been promoting some of this hateful information. So we are, as a government, on the front foot, ensuring that we engage with the online companies, that we show the leadership that is expected, and make sure the material is taken down.
Rachel McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all condemn and feel disgusted by the hate speech that's been propagated by Mr. Trump and by others. But does she agree with me that the danger with these organisations like Britain First is that they cloak their hateful activities behind a cloak of kind of fluffiness, and they sometimes will talk about Remembrance Day, and they actually do this in a very invidious way to trick people? I'm not suggesting this is Donald Trump, he ought to have known better, but this is the tactics they're using. So what is she doing with the government to really understand and develop her understanding so we can fight this on all the fronts that it affects our communities so dangerously?
Well, I think my honourable friend raises a very important point, and she is absolutely right that sometimes these extremist far-right groups do exactly as she has said. They try to hijack our national symbols and our national days of memorial or remembrance, and we need to make sure that we always call that out. I would say to my honourable friend, the best thing we can do is call it out and make sure that we spread the alternative word, the alternative story about British values.
Paul Flynn.
2 million people signed a petition of outrage when the President was given an honour that's never been offered to any other President. That's to have a red carpet visit to the country in the first month of his office. Since then, he has dangerously increased tension in every world frozen conflict that he's addressed. He has disgraced himself again and again, and he worries us because his impulsive finger is on the nuclear button. If he's allowed to come to this country now, he should be treated as anyone else who breaks the law and charged with inciting racial hatred. The government should withdraw the invitation.
Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would just repeat to the honourable gentleman that we haven't yet made the arrangements for the visit, but the invitation has been extended and it has been accepted.
Mr. Philip Hollowbone.
Politics and Twitter is a toxic mix. For politicians, tweeting encourages the transmission of half-formed ideas instead of listening to the developed arguments of others. It prompts a culture of instant reaction as opposed to considered thought, and it provokes people to immediate outrage instead of pauseful reflection. Could my right honourable friend tell the House how politicians taking to Twitter has led to an improvement in modern civilisation?
The Home Secretary.
I think that is slightly beyond my capacity today, Mr. Speaker. But I would just say to my honourable friend that he is right insofar as I think that many of us could benefit for a little more considered thought and pauseful contemplation before pressing respond or reply to Twitter attacks.
Ben Lake.
Speaker, it's important that the messages of hate spread by the President of the United States are condemned for the vile acts they truly are. And I speak on behalf of my party when I urge the government to rescind its offer of a state visit to a President who has used his global platform to propagate intolerance. But could I ask the Home Secretary to further elaborate on the pressure that will be exerted on social media platforms such as Twitter to prevent such untrue and poisonous content from permeating our society?
Home Secretary.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman, and I would just again repeat that in terms of the visit from the President, the invitation has been extended and accepted, and I would also point out that as the President of the United States, we must remember that the United States itself has such an important relationship with this country in terms of keeping us safe as well. So before we rush to making those changes, I would urge all honourable members to just keep that in mind, the importance of it. I also hope he has heard from me this morning about how very seriously we take the issue of making sure that all illegal and extreme content that is illegal is taken down from Twitter and other online platforms, and that they take more of an active role themselves in making sure that this material doesn't stay up there.
Matt Warman.
Mr. Speaker. In a cynical attempt to harness the Brexit vote in my constituency, the EDL last year sought to organise a far-right march. Now, just 9 people showed up, but that is 9 people too many. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that there is still work to do to make sure that while the views of the EDL and Britain First do not represent the mainstream of this country and they are abhorrent, there is work to do to make sure we disabuse those people who do hold those views, and we should bring forth more to make sure that we can disabuse them?
Yes, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and they in no way represent the views of the British people as he and I and the rest of the honourable members know them to be. But there is always more work to do. As he says, even 9 are unwelcome. But as has also been pointed out several times in the House today, the real danger of encouraging activity and extremism is increasingly online, and that is where we're focusing so much of our effort to ensure that we don't allow it to continue.
Naz Shah.
In her previous role as Home Secretary, the Prime Minister banned people from entering this country, individuals who had promoted organisations peddling the hate-filled ideology of fascism. This morning, David Duke, Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, applauded Donald Trump. The New York Times notes that no modern president, American president, has promoted inflammatory content of this sort from an extremist organisation. Not only has the commander-in-chief done this, he has defended it, publicly chastising the British Prime Minister for her comments. Putting aside the question of a state visit, should he even be allowed to enter our country, because unprecedented actions require unprecedented responses?
And just to point out to the Honourable Lady, the Prime Minister has robustly replied to the President and made her views absolutely clear. In terms of what the Honourable Lady is also proposing, I would say that we do not routinely comment on individual exclusion cases.
Masterton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Home Secretary satisfied that President Trump's behaviour, which is not an isolated incident, doesn't undermine the important security and cooperation relationship we have with the United States? And can I just say that just because somebody stops using Twitter doesn't mean they cease to be a twit?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend puts his finger on the matter, if I may say, in the first half of his comments, which is how important that close relationship is. And however strongly honourable members feel about the President himself, we must protect that particular relationship that we have with the US, which does so much to keep British people safe.
Chris Bryant.
I think the Home Secretary, if I'm honest, is missing something here. This was not an accident. It wasn't stupid. It was deliberate and intentional. And the evidence of that is even after the Prime Minister said he was wrong, he decided to stand by Britain first. And I say to the Home Secretary, it's no good saying we've been robust. You've been robust before. It's not made the blindest bit of difference. He's a repeat offender, and it will go on and on and on. You cannot stand up to this kind of action. You cannot stand up to horrible racism or pretend to do so and invite the man in through the front door. In the past, the Home Secretary repeatedly and quite rightly, when she was Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, when she was Home Secretary, said homophobes and racists who will stir up hatred in this country will not be allowed in this country, and if they come to this country, they'll be arrested. That's what should happen in this case, and the Home Secretary knows it. Just say it.
Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the honourable gentleman, there is no pretence here. We are absolutely clear in the action that we will take against people who propagate hate. And he should not underestimate the Prime Minister's views on this and the Prime Minister's absolute clarity on criticising the President and showing that to the public in her comment to him. So I won't take any criticism for him on the fact that this side of the House, this government, is committed to the agenda of making sure that we protect people, we promote British values, and I will continue to take that position from here.
Mims Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for her very important words this morning, echoing the Prime Minister. Would she agree with me that all politicians, all community leaders at every level, in every community, have a duty to be temperate in their language, tolerant in their actions, mindful of their social media presence, and make sure that the Home Secretary holds content platforms to account so that community cohesion and understanding is maintained?
Secretary.
Yes, my honourable friend is absolutely right. The issue of making sure that we support communities in their genuine efforts and plans and programmes to hold together despite difficulties that may come through is incredibly important. And we saw that this year. We saw that when, despite the wake of a series of terrorist attacks, our communities did hold together. And many of them went out of their way to support other faiths where other people were criticising them. That is the British way. Those are our values. That is what we should be proud of.
Dr. Lisa Cameron.
Many thanks, Mr. Speaker. We must take a firm stance against hate speak and ensure that future generations do. Would the Home Secretary speak with colleagues and consider supporting Holocaust education in schools so that younger generations can understand the importance of standing against discrimination and the very grave consequences of inaction?
Home Secretary.
Well, it's a very important point from the Honourable Lady, and I thank her for raising it. The Holocaust Educational Trust does incredibly good and important work. I know that because some of the children in my schools in Hastings and Rye have been on those trips. I've been on one myself. It is a very powerful way of remembering the terrible things that happened and how by remembering, by learning, we can make sure they don't happen again. So I absolutely support her point.
Steve Double.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Home Secretary share my astonishment that someone in the position of the President of the United States actually finds the time to be trawling through Twitter looking for posts as abhorrent as he has retweeted? And does she share my view that far from making America great again, his actions in retweeting those tweets actually reflect badly on his office and actually undermine the very principles that the United States was founded on?
A very important point from my honourable friend, which is why the Prime Minister was so swift and so firm in her response to his tweet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I think of Muslim children in Newcastle waking up to find themselves being attacked by the President of the most powerful nation on earth, because that is how it will appear to them, then my heart bleeds. However, the 45th President is not accountable to the children of Newcastle. It's hard to see to whom he does hold himself accountable, but the social media giants are, through the Home Secretary. So what is the Home Secretary going to do today to demonstrate that accountability?
The Honourable Lady might refer her friends and the community to the comment by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, who very much made his comments as a Muslim, and I think that other Muslims in this country might take comfort from that as well. In terms of what we are doing online, we are making sure that we provide the leadership that is necessary to make as much of this hate and illegal information that is sometimes put online taken down. And in order to do that, the relationship with the US, which is what is so critical for this House to understand, that the relationship with the US is absolutely critical to making real progress with the online companies. They are American companies. They are based in Silicon Valley. They are subject to US law. If we are going to make real progress with these internet companies, we have to do it in close alliance with our American friends.
Kate Green.
When the Prime Minister has her next regular conversation with the United States President, could the Home Secretary ensure that she conveys to him that the purveying of this kind of hate speech simply serves the ends of those who wish to promote hatred in my constituency and between different communities in my constituency? And does she also undertake to ask the Prime Minister to convey to him that my black, Muslim, Jewish, Sikh and other minority constituents, every time this kind of hate speech is perpetrated, feel more fear, alienation and suspicion from others in the community, and that is why he, the President, will not be welcome in this country, because he is perpetrating and extending that hate speech.
We are very clear that the sort of hate that she describes, the sort of division that is sown by Britain First, for instance, is completely unwelcome here in the UK. And we will always make sure that we take action to call it out. We also operate in the Home Office to take down information that can sometimes get up there that should not be there. We take down, in terms of terrorist content, about 2,000 pieces a week. We are always stepping up to make sure that we have more information out there that can help to bind our communities together. Because, like her, I share that view. I have the same response in my own constituency to wanting to be absolutely clear that our communities will hold together, that we abhor all hate crime, and that we will make sure we always say that.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I offer the government a way out of the diplomatic ditch that they're in? Her Majesty the Queen, because of her great and very welcome age, has been cutting back on her engagements. She's got a royal wedding to look forward to next year, and the birth of a new great-grandchild. Don't those facts alone justify the government announcing the postponement of the state visit by the President of the United States for at least, say, 3 years?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his thoughtful advice to the royal family. And as I have said previously, the dates have not yet been agreed. But thank you for his advice. Thank you.
Mr. Barry Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very saddened by what Trump has done. Like many people in our country, I have been a great friend of America's. Indeed, as a very young man, I emigrated to the United States and still cherish my old green card. But so many of my American friends and relatives have said to me over this last few hours, this man does not speak for America. This man has betrayed the tradition of the United States, yes, of freedom and liberty and respecting everyone, whatever their religion or their background. Please, as we negotiate this thing, and please stop this man coming on a state visit, because if he comes, there will be demonstrations unparalleled in the past in this country. Please, will she act now before it's too late?
Home Secretary.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his comments, and like him, I am a great admirer of America. And like him, I have friends with different views, shall we say, to the President, who are keen to communicate them to me sometimes. As far as the invitation is concerned, I thank him for his views, but no date has been agreed yet.
Ian Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I emphasise that the issues that the President of the United States has said on Twitter is not what the American people feel, and I'm sure that most Americans would be both embarrassed and abhorred by what the President has done. The Home Secretary is in charge of policing in this country, so this is a very serious and direct question. Racial and religious hatred and inciting it is a crime in this country. Have either Twitter or the President of the United States committed a crime?
Mr. Speaker, we keep all potential crimes of the type that the honourable gentleman has referred to under review. I'm not going to comment on individual cases of the type that he has particularly said. I'm sure he can conclude himself of the line between free speech and criminal activity, and I think I will leave it at that.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 years ago, I tabled an early-day motion calling for then-presidential candidate Trump to be banned from visiting the United Kingdom in light of the extremely divisive comments he made at that time, until he retracted those comments. With his tweets yesterday and overnight, it is clear that he has not changed, and that's the key point. So can the Home Secretary tell me why it is right for someone so intent on stirring up hatred contrary to the values of this country to be invited to the UK for an all-expenses-paid state visit at the expense of the taxpayer?
And what about the values of the American people? The American people of whom he is the President. The American people who so many members here on both sides of the House have said how much they admire. Those are the values that I admire. Those are the values that I feel we have so much in common with.
Tony Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Home Secretary will know very well that in this tolerant country of ours, non-Muslims, Muslims live in peace together as friends, neighbours, sometimes as members of the same families. How do I go back and explain to my own constituents that there is a national interest in inviting somebody who is there to divide our communities one from another.
Home Secretary.
Well, I would urge the honourable gentleman to point out perhaps some of the points that I have made today in the House about the way that he is the American president and we have such admiration and affection for the American people, that we share values with them in so many different ways, and that we are so grateful to their intelligence services, their security services, that with whom we work so closely, that their closeness of that work, the trust that is between us, allows them to help save British lives so effectively. That is why we have such a close and special relationship with the Americans.
Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Taking the charitable view that the President of the United States doesn't know the character of this organisation whose vile utterances he has endorsed, will she assure the House that the government will make him well aware of its view of the character of this organisation and of its effects, so that he has the opportunity clearly to distance himself from any association with it before there can be any question of him visiting the United Kingdom?
Secretary.
It is certainly our intention to be absolutely clear that the type of organisation that he appeared to be promoting in his retweet is wholly unwelcome, is full of hate, and we will continue to call that out. I think that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, made that clear in her criticism of him, but we will not miss an opportunity to make that point again, and we will do so strongly and firmly.
Dr. Rupa Haq.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Back in 2010, the now Prime Minister, as Home Secretary, banned radical Indian televangelist preacher Zakir Naik from entering the UK for his repeated pattern of unacceptable behaviour, and in particular his line, "Every Muslim is a terrorist." Her exact words at the time were, "I'm not willing to allow those not conducive to the public good to enter the UK." Surely the same applies here to President Trump and his frequent repugnant outbursts, and given particularly that we're in Islamophobia Awareness Month, just launched here the other day, where the government's own Casey report was quoted. That says that trigger events feed Islamophobia. That means women with hijabs being ripped off them. It means granddads being murdered on the way back from prayers. It means pigs' heads being left on mosque doorsteps. As a Muslim, can I ask that she does the same as her predecessor, as our Prime Minister did with those previous examples? There was also a rapper who was excluded for his misogynist lyrics. Can they not just continue that tract and ban this visit altogether?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for the point particularly that she made about Islamophobia, which we take incredibly seriously, which is why it featured so strongly in the Hate Crime Action Plan that I launched last year, and which is why we've provided extra money to make sure that mosques can be protected, which is why we provide additional financial support for Tell Mama, which does such great work combating Islamophobia. So we are very serious about making sure that the type of hate crime that she addressed is taken seriously and stopped so we can protect people. And my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, was absolutely right to ban the people that she referred to. We don't comment on individual exclusion cases, but I will make sure that we always look very carefully where it is appropriate.
Clive Efford.
Speaker, my constituents of Eltham know only too well where extremism ultimately leads, and the actions of the President cannot be set aside as a mistake. He is a repeat offender, as has already been said. These are his views, and anybody else holding these views would not be welcome in this country. And the Home Secretary must see the double standards that she's representing here today by saying that she condemns the actions of the President, but at the same time is opening out her arms with an invitation to him to come to this country. Surely she has to say and send a clear message that he is not welcome here.
Home Secretary.
Well, I don't accept that there are double standards. What I accept is that we have been totally consistent in making sure that we call out hate crime and we take aggressive action in order to stop it, which is why my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, responded so strongly to that tweet, and why other Cabinet Ministers have also taken action as well. So we will always make sure that we call it out and we take action in order to stop the vile hate crime that can take place.
Liz McInnes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has anyone in the UK government actually asked for these tweets to be taken down?
Very good.
Mr. Speaker, I'll have to come back to the Honourable Lady on that matter.
Paula Sheriff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Home Secretary provide me with some guidance about how I should respond to residents in my incredibly diverse constituency when they ask me why our government are affording someone with such abhorrent, vile, fascist and bigoted views the luxury of a state visit? And if we don't take action today, when will we?
Well, can I ask the Honourable Lady to refer her constituents, as I will mine, to the strong action, the strong response that the Prime Minister responded with. And also I would ask her to point out why the strong relationship with the US is so in her constituents' interests. Tell them, explain to them that it is action that we have shared with the intelligence services in the US that helps to keep British people safe. We don't want to jeopardise any of that. She shakes her head, but this is an important point in terms of keeping her constituents safe. That relationship is so critical to us. I wouldn't want to harm it at all.
Mike Amesbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Surely the robust response required now is to withdraw that invitation.
The most important action that we can take to stop the promulgation of the type of hate crime that has been promoted by Britain First and is promoted by other extreme right-wing groups is to make sure that we work with the major internet companies to get more action taken. And this is exactly the area where the UK has been leading internationally. It is the area where the Prime Minister has been leading at the recent UN conference. And this whole House can rely on this government to make sure that we do that. We will make sure that they deliver for us.
Order. In thanking the honourable gentleman for Cardiff South and Penarth for submitting his urgent question, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Home Secretary and the Shadow Home Secretary for being present on this important occasion. And coupled with that, perhaps I can express my gratitude to all colleagues for participating in this very important set of exchanges. Just before I call the Shadow Leader for Business question, I would emphasise that there is huge pressure on time from now on, because there is an emergency debate under SO24 to take place, which can run for up to 3 hours.